Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I gotta tell you, being an entrepreneur, I will not go through the rest of my career without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, paracetam, modafinil, Noopept, uridim monophosphate. I mean, phenylparacetam, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 53 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Ballo. This is going to be an awesome one. We're going to talk about basically how some people's goals, everybody has different goals for nootropics, right? Like you got the business guy who wants to improve focus and productivity. He wants to literally improve his productive output by 10% or 15%. It's going to help him get a raise or make the company more productive, make him more productive in his job to help the company grow. You know, then there's the mom who's got 4 or 5 kids, needs good brain performance. Past 5 p.m., she starts to run out of energy, so she looks to nootropics to sort of fix that problem. And then there's the entrepreneur who's not an executive, not a CEO, doesn't sit behind a desk. The entrepreneur is just does everything, right? Just like builds companies from scratch, thinks of products to create. Is just sort of crazy and tenacious and moves forward and everything. And he or she takes nootropics for that for focus and productivity, but just for that extra edge in terms of mental energy to get them to do what they got to do. Entrepreneurs work 17, 18 hours a day, if not in action, in thought for sure. And so they need brain performance for that. But for some people, right, all these different classes of folks that take nootropics, some people just want to be normal. Some folks just want to have some regular degree of verbal fluency, that their verbal fluency, memory, processing speed, motivation is so impaired they just want to be normal people. So I kind of want to talk about that and talk about how, that's something that a lot of folks that we've interacted with over the years as a company over the last year when we really scaled up consulting on nootropics. You just run into a lot of people who fit that category, start taking nootropics, and it literally changes their life because they start to get some of these basic things back in terms of brain function that make people whole, make people have personalities, and make people be able to go out in public and do stuff that they really couldn't do because they were so impaired from bike accident, from a traumatic injury, from a other brain injury, right? From some illness that fussed with the way that their brain functioned, that they couldn't go out and do it. I want to go through some examples of some folks that we've dealt with, folks that were in car accidents, bike accidents, and have had debilitating diseases, give them brain fog, and then how nootropics changed it. Let's do a minute and a half of our sponsors because they support the broadcast. But guess who they are? It's us, because we don't have sponsors. We sponsor our stuff with, at this point, 6 powerful nootropic products. If you're listening to this within 6 months, we probably have more products out. So check us out on livecortex.com. But the main products right now are, number one, the Cortex Stack. Cortex Stack is our powerful pre-made stack. It is a nootropic stack originally intended for entrepreneurs to facilitate productivity, right? It's the kind of stack you take if you've got 8 hours of work to do, you haven't started yet, and you need to be a beast. You're entering a meeting and you need verbal fluency. You're going to do something and you need a lot of heavy brain energy to endure through a task. Cortex is like, folks compare it to modafinil, saying it's like the modafinil of the natural stack world. And basically the reason that is because we strongly target dopamine. That might make sense. I mean, modafinil targets dopamine by increasing extracellular dopamine. Cortex targets dopamine by increasing dopamine receptor densities, sort of all around modulating and optimizing the dopaminergic system, but also does great other things. Targets neurite outgrowth, the spawning of new branches between neurons, increases phospholipid synthesis, and partially converts to CDP-choline, which is an awesome other ingredient, which is another ingredient that we have in Cortex. So the synergized the combination of uridine and CDP-choline really packs a powerful punch in the particular quantities we've got them. We've also got small dose artichoke extract in there with a little bit of Bacopa monnieri, and we found that onset of the stack quicker made it potent and more stimulatory, and also added to the neurite outgrowth benefits, at least in theory. So that's the Cortex Stack. Get it at livecortex.com right now. We lowered the price. No coupon code, no nothing, to $27. Get the most powerful pre-made stack, what's being called the only pre-made stack that works, Cortex at livecortex.com. We've got some digital guides. I'll break them down very quickly, then we'll get right to the podcast. Number one, the Beginner's Guide to Aniracetam. It is a digital downloadable guide, teaches about aniracetam, has powerful stacks for focus, for memory, for motivation, everything, with combinations of all the good nootropics in the book in the Aniracetam, the Beginner's Guide to Aniracetam. Number two, the Noopept Pro Stack List, probably the most comprehensive digital guide on Noopept on the planet with accompanying stacks. Number 3, the Racetam God Guide. Bunch of Racetam stacks. Easily the most comprehensive guide on Racetams on the planet. Number 4, Smarter, Better, Faster, which is the guide to get if you're new to nootropics. Teaches you everything, gives you the first introduction, gives you stacks to take. And then number 5, the Nootropic stacks for the business professional. It is 100 stacks for business productivity. Very powerful stacks. All right, that is the sponsor stuff. I'm sure I went over a minute and a half, and I'm trying to keep it in a minute and a half. Maybe I just need to talk faster. All right, so yeah, let me just get into, because I gave you guys the preface, let me just get right into a few examples of people that have had serious problems that nootropics have really helped alleviate the cognitive fog that was coming from those issues, and that now those folks can actually function normal. To them, they're not getting like some substantial verbal fluency, some substantial modafinil effect. They're just able to function normal again. They really don't feel, a lot of them don't really feel substantial stimulatory effects like that a normal person with no atrophy, brain atrophy, might feel when they take something like modafinil or uridine or something. But they notice that everything works better again. They have their memory, they've got their verbal fluency, they're motivated to do stuff. Their brains feel alive. We hear that a lot. So the first example is a middle-aged guy. I guess, late 30s is what I consider middle-aged. Got in a car accident 20 years ago. And damaged his brain, had a little bit of brain damage. He was mobile pretty shortly after the accident, but he basically had terrible short-term memory thereafter. There was nothing anybody could really ever do about it. He tried brain training, like little neurofeedback. He tried all the sort of low-level stuff you could think of, like, what are they called? Entrainment and ISO tones, these tones that are emitted like in a particular sound frequency that are supposed to resonate with your brain. And basically everything else in between. He got a mild effect from Adderall, but it didn't make him feel like he had his memory back. It just sort of made him feel amped up. So he kind of thought he had to deal with it. He got into the world of nootropics, came across our videos on YouTube, right? All these wonderful videos we post on YouTube. Now we have like 350 videos or something. Started kind of getting interested in nootropics, ordered some. And right away, with the cholinergics, noticed a benefit, right? Alpha GPC, CDP choline, DMAE, centrophenoxine, NuPep particularly, the guy was kind of like getting results from NuPep. And so hit us up, he did some consulting, told me his story. Our consulting is a nootropics consulting service. We do a 40-minute call. It's a Skype video call most times, right? So I get to sit there and listen to people's stories and hear what they need and tailor stacks for people that are individual. This guy's case was very different than most folks. Most folks hit us up. They're a college kid wanting to, improve brain performance. They got to study a lot, or somebody in the business sector, etc. But here's a person with traumatic brain injury and whose brain hasn't been working good for 20 years. So basically, we formulated some suggestions for the guy. And the suggestions were primarily NuPep-based stacks. There was a coloracetam stack in there. We had some aniracetam, oxiracetam, piracetam as alternatives. And then we also had the stack that I almost give everybody as a stack, like it's 80% this is going to work for you. And that's a uridine, CDP choline, Alcar, B vitamin centric stack. And then the guy went off and experimented further with it with the doses we suggested, and the rate of improvement in particularly working memory, verbal fluency, just having the brain capacity to focus and to hold a conversation with somebody, to go out and go to the store and to remember what they needed to get. Even the act of looking at the list you wrote for stuff you got to get at the grocery and getting it, then going to the aisle and checking out and leaving, going, remember where your car was. These are things we take for granted, but folks that have brain damage and folks that are running into hardcore memory deficits, to them, they don't have it anymore, and it's depressing. It's like their lives that, if you don't have those basic things, you really can't go live a normal life, right? And so these things started to come back for this guy, which is pretty amazing. And but the thing is that he doesn't get some substantial cool HD vision or any of this sort of stuff that we talk about when I think normal folks with good brains go and take nootropics, and for the first couple days, like their brains are just like loving it and it's super optimized, and thereafter they might run into tolerance because they're taking too much of it. Folks think they can take nootropics every day. It's different. For this guy, he just wanted to feel normal, and now he feels normal again. It's like for him, all he wanted to do is have his life back. That's example number 1. Example number 2, good friend of mine, special dude, just a great dude, that has been taking benzodiazepines for quite some time, 10 years. 10 or so years, a long time. And before that, it was, some other pharmaceutical drugs. And over time, they have, when he takes them, when he's on them, as some of you might imagine that might take them, he's got basically just like short-term memory loss right then and there when he takes these benzos and when they're working on GABA receptors. And it's become like a thing, so much of a problem that it started to interfere with his everyday life, right? I mean, the state of anxiety, which really resulted from some drug use very early on in this dude's life, in his teen years, was difficult and debilitating, but not quite as debilitating as having anxiety, having to take benzodiazepines, and then also, as a result, having terrible working memory. I mean, like, he had to resort to working a very basic job in which there were no major working memory things. I mean, it was just a very, very simple job, and he really couldn't expand out of that field. He couldn't do anything else because of this sort of this affliction that he had with working memory from benzodiazepines. And so, Cortex was the first stack that I gave him, but ultimately to end up having him save money, I told him, look, get the ingredients. Here's the ingredients. Here's the quantities you want to put. And it was Cortex and a B complex. A simple stack, Cortex B complex coffee, that basically transformed this guy's life around. Within a month and a half or so, he got a different job, and it was like an analytical. Just like, this is what he used to do back in the day. He always wanted to be an accountant. He always wanted to be into analytics. He always wanted to sort of look at numbers. He was a numbers guy, and he just couldn't do it anymore after having being on benzos and having it mess his brain up. So he got like some sort of analytical job. Since then, he's moved up in the world. He got a different job working for a major CPA firm in Eastern Pennsylvania. That's a accountant, a certified public accountant, like accounting firms, accountants that sit and do like taxes for businesses or whatever. And now he works for this firm, and he's doing great still. He still takes nootropics, but he doesn't. Again, the thing about him is that he doesn't feel like he's Bradley Cooper, Eddie Moore, the fictional character in the movie Limitless, which is a movie about, effectively about nootropics, pharmaceutical nootropic compound. He doesn't feel that. He just feels normal. He just has his brain back. He just has his memory back. He just has his focus ability back. It's amazing how much we take this stuff for granted. Just the ability to focus, even for 10 minutes, is a problem for guys like that, people with these issues. And especially, the first example we gave of the guy who got into the car accident. I mean, focusing was a chore for 5 minutes. Focusing. I mean, these folks, some of these folks that really have it bad, they're writing Post-its around their apartment to get them to remember, like, make sure you turn the oven off because you just made food. Like, make sure you put your keys. Here's where you put your keys, because the working memory literally fails after a couple minutes. This guy got his life back, from taking nootropics. Doesn't feel substantial, nothing super stimulatory, just can focus, has working memory, speed of processing, has verbal fluency again, and thus these folks have confidence again. They can go back out into the world and become productive members of society. They don't have to feel depressed and run down and like their failures, sitting in their home or sitting in, God forbid, like their parents' house, like sitting there just like dwindling away, like, I become nothing. And that would just be a terribly depressive state. When I had mono in 2015, it hit me for considerably longer than it seems to hit other folks. I mean, we're talking about over a year. And it was terrible. I mean, my best self, like knowing how to hack my brain and do all this great stuff to facilitate performance. I mean, like, yeah, I got out of it quicker than I think most other folks would that were afflicted with a longer term, essentially like, I guess you can call it an infection of the Epstein-Barr virus, which is what causes mono, but it goes and does a whole number of different things. It can do a number of different things, from induce autoimmunity to embed itself in your thyroid gland. It can really be a problem. Slows gut motility, which it can trigger a cascade of a whole bunch of additional problems. During that time, I get what these people feel like, because I was like, I know who I am, I know my performance, right? But this virus is really, really just kicking my butt. And so that's the thing. I mean, it's just terrible to be in that state, and I'm sure I could not fathom it to the extent that these folks are experiencing, especially folks with brain damage, and especially folks that are, through, for one reason or another, for some directive of their doctor, having to take certain pharmaceutical compounds that fuss with their memory so bad they can't live a normal life. But now they can. So that's basically it. I mean, I just wanted to share those two stories with you folks and just kind of say, there's many uses, right? I think I kind of, there's many different points to this podcast, but laying out in the beginning the different profiles of people that take nootropics is just fascinating, right? You got the mom who needs extra energy, you got the entrepreneur, you got the CEO, you got the nootropics enthusiast, you got the college kid, but then you got somebody who just wants their brain back, right? They just want to be like you. I mean, they just want to function normal, right? They just want to be able to have a conversation with somebody. They want to be able to go out in public and not like forget what they were there for. You know, they want to be able to get a job that like encompasses like more. They can apply more of themselves and learn more skills and become more. You know, these folks, I got to tell you, when you get beat down and hit by the world enough and you're in crappy stage, you just want to live again. You know, you just want to get out there. You just want to make progress. You just want to move forward, because being in that other state where you're not moving forward and you're stagnant and you can't help it, that is like absolute hell. So some people with nootropics, they just want to be normal. Thanks so much for listening. I hope that's been an awesome podcast for you folks. And look, I mean, if there's folks listening to this that have traumatic brain injury or are running into memory problems from taking certain pharmaceutical compounds, you ought to look at nootropics if you haven't so far. I mean, obviously you're listening to this podcast, so you are to some extent. But you haven't tried them, go for it. I mean, you really don't have a whole lot to use. Most of them are extremely safe to take, and some of them safe to take relatively long term. And you know, I mean, ultimately we are talking about underlying brain physiology not working the way it's supposed to work. Whether we're talking about cholinergic or dopaminergic signaling or a combination of both, glutaminergic signaling, serotonergic signaling, GABAergic signaling, and or some other sort of systemic functional thing going on in the brain that if it's not working right, you're not going to work right. At the end of the day, nootropics do help a lot of people in these situations. I see it over and over and over and over again. And that's one of the really cool things about the field. You know, it's not just like, you know, kids taking nootropics to like feel on like they're on speed and like, you know, outperform their peers in studying or something. I mean, it's people applying nootropics to certain situations to get productivity. It's people taking nootropics to facilitate promotions in their job. It's people taking nootropics to facilitate extra energy later on. And it's folks that just want to be normal. Thanks so much for listening. That has been episode number 53 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. Check us out on the web at livecortex.com, at livecortex.com/blog. Biggest blog on the planet for nootropics information. We got a lot of stuff there, all these videos. Most of the videos, lots of the podcasts get posted there. All the podcasts, actually. And then our products, man. Cortex right now, $27. It's just the beginning of January 2018. That'll be for at least another month because we got to sell out everything we got because we got no inventory coming in. So basically our loss is your gain. $27 Cortex Nootropic Stack. Powerful pre-made stack. And then our 5 digital guides that teach you how to use nootropics, but mostly they give you nootropic stacks to take that target focus, to target speed of processing, that target motivation, target verbal fluency, target all the good stuff. Hey, if you take those stacks, might sound like me, or at the very least, be as verbally fluent. LiveCortex.com for all that good stuff. Thanks so much for being with me. Thanks so much for listening. Rock on. Talk to you next time.